Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to do a review of my World's Greatest Composers units for you. I can't believe I haven't put up a video of this before, but I had someone request it and then I realized I'd never done it. So I'm going to just show you what the units look like, what supplies you need, what the kind of finished product is going to look like when you're done for your kids. And then of course, if you have any questions, you're always welcome to email me as well. So let's take a closer look at the World's Greatest Artist Curriculum. Alright, so here's kind of what the World's Greatest Composers setup is going to look like, and I have a volume 1 and 2 of these available. This is my volume 1, I believe, and I did outline this to go with the Mike Venezia World's Greatest Artist Composers book. I have had some questions on whether or not you can use this curriculum without these books, and yes, you can. You can just do an online search, you know, just a biography for each one of the musicians as you go through. There's also links in the curriculum to listen to the music selections as well. So you can do a lot of this online. You just kind of have to do your own research, but my teacher's manual will tell you what you're going to be discussing each day and what you should be listening to and that kind of thing. So you could potentially get away with it without using these. I do like these. They're great for younger students. They have lots of colorful pictures and whatnot in them, and they also have these fun little cartoons that my kids really liked these. But they just have kind of an overview of each artist or musician's life and just details, interesting facts, and that kind of thing. So if you can get a hold of these, I would suggest it. There are links in the teacher's manual to them on Amazon. That's where I got mine from. I think they range $6 to $7 a piece, something like that. So like I said, you don't absolutely have to use these. You can do an internet search for each one as well. So this particular unit covers Tchaikovsky, sorry, I always have a hard time saying that, Stravinsky, Bach, Chopin, Mozart, Beethoven, and George Handel. So that's who's going to be covered in this one. I'll put a link for volume 2 as well so you can see that. Also, all that information is on my website as well. So when you purchase it, what you're actually going to be getting is your teacher's manual and your student notebook, and these are available in either download or CD format, and then you can print them off. I just had these spiral bound at Office Depot or whatever, and I printed them off at home. Now, I would probably not necessarily spiral bind the student manual. I did this for a curriculum fair that we went at just to show people, but just because they're going to be using those worksheets and cutting them out and whatnot. This comes with a binder, like a cover if you want to put it on a binder, as well as a spine label you can stick in there as well. And then it goes through the table of contents, what it covers, any additional resources that you'll need. It has links to all of those books as well. And then for the curriculum, the Greatest Composers Curriculum, like I said, this is available in CD or download, and the most questions I get is whether or not the CD is a music CD. It is not. The CD is actually the documents that I'm showing you here. There are links in the teacher's manual to listen to everything online, so you don't order a CD or anything like that. Now you can listen to each of the songs in a clip format for free on Naxos.com, or you can do a one-year subscription for $19.95 if you want to listen to entire clips. You can also do kind of some online searching and find other music as well, but Naxos was just a great place. It had kind of all of the selections in one spot, and like I said, you can listen to clips for free, so I thought that was kind of nice. There's also an Introduction to Composers section on there. And then a scheduling, recommendation as well. I normally would schedule this maybe twice a week or so. Each composer has 10 lessons, and so if you do it at that pace, you can get through all of them in 1 year. You can also do it once a week. You can do it 4 times a week. You can stretch it out over a couple years. You can do, kind of however you want. This is super flexible. I would say each of the lessons take between 15 and 20 minutes or so to complete. So just, you can kind of factor that in on your scheduling, but otherwise it really doesn't matter how many days a week you do this. Since it's an elective, you can kind of just do whatever fits best with your needs. Now, there's also some games and whatnot, but here's some tabs for my students. I actually put them in a binder, and then I put these little tabs in between them so they could kind of do it as like a notebooking section, and I just got those plastic dividers from, just your office supply store, and then you can just kind of stick these in those. So that's kind of a nice thing to have. Now, the first thing it starts out with is an orchestra introduction. It talks about different stages that music has gone through, and then of course there's a lap book activity as well. And then in each of the lap book activities, there's kind of a picture of the layout. There's also instructions on how to create the lap book as well, and it just kind of shows you where to place each of your, items as you're creating it. So this one is just more introduction to the orchestra. I'll show you the lap book in just a second, and then again there's a picture on where to add them and whatnot. So you go through and just learn kind of overall musical information. You learn about the different sections, the brass, percussion, whatever, woodwinds, string sections, that kind of thing. So by the time you're done, you kind of understand the seating of the orchestra and you've heard all the different instruments, and you kind of can identify them based on their sounds and what they look like and that kind of thing. And then you'll get into the actual lessons themselves, and you'll be taking, again, each composer and doing about 10 different lessons on each one. Now there is a little bit of information, biography on them, kind of what genre they were in, their primary style of music, their lifespan, where they were from, and that kind of information before you get started. And then each lesson will refer to a reading out of these books, but like I said, you can actually just find a biography online and just kind of go over that as well. All right, so once you've done the reading, there's usually some vocabulary information. The lessons can vary a little bit. I try and do, more introductory at the beginning, and then you'll get into deeper conversations as you go. There will also be a listening section, and then these blue underlined items are linked to the Naxos website where you can listen to that selection, but it does tell you what you're listening to, so you could also do an online search, or if you have these musicians at home, you can also listen to them on a CD or however it works best for you. Then there's going to be your lap book activity, and then there's some discussion questions, and these are really more conversational. I like to let the kids do a lot more of, the talking than I do. I try and ask them critical thinking questions about the music. How does it make you feel? What are some of the things that you hear in there? What kind of a tone is it setting, and that kind of thing. But anyways, the questions are all kind of led in here by you, and then your students can kind of discuss and just talk about the music as they're listening to it. There are also activities as well, so there might be things for them to do while they're listening. So for example, if they might be coloring a sheet where they're having to color the instruments that they're hearing in a selection, or things like that. So there's critical thinking worksheets that kind of go with that, and I'll show you the student workbook in a minute. But as you can see, there are 10 lessons. Each one has a listening section, and then some discussion questions and an activity to fill out while you are going through the lessons. So then here's the student notebook. And this is basically the lap booking pages. So they have their lap book cover that they can cut out and put on the front of their lap book, and then of course they have anything that they need to add to their lap book. And there's also pictures in here showing your students where to add each item and what to do with it, and what to write on it and that kind of thing. So this is just basically going to be your activities and all of that, and they are in order here. So for example, let's get to the first lesson on Bach. All right, here we go. Okay, so the first lesson, the students are going to be listening to something, and then as they're listening to a selection, they're going to fill out the different instruments that they can hear in that composition. So that just has them kind of doing something, but at the same time, they're critically listening to the music and actually trying to find out and pick out what kind of instruments that they can hear. There's also a description while they're listening to something, and they need to figure out words to describe the music that they're listening to, and that's just kind of it's a good activity to go through to be able to kind of pick out things like whether it's kind of upbeat or more melancholy or whatever. So they can kind of do that, and then they're also going to be adding their composer to their timeline piece as they go, and those instructions, like I said, are in your teacher's manual. They're here, and then there's also instructions on where to put that. One of them is a coloring page that they can kind of color as they're listening to today's selection. And I wanted them to have activities to do while they were listening, because I think it helps their mind focus on what they're listening on. I found that, if you have somebody just listening to a random, selection of music, then sometimes they can just kind of wander off and they're not really suddenly paying attention to it. But if they're doing an activity that's directly correlating to what they're listening to, I think that kind of helps. If you have a student who has a hard time doing that, you can have them just maybe close their eyes and listen to the selection and then maybe do the activity afterwards. Just kind of whatever works best for your student. There's always a free drawing worksheet where they can kind of use colors to convey the mood of the music and maybe an image of how it makes them feel or what they're thinking about. That kind of thing. Here's some worksheet on where they're writing down different instruments that they hear. If you have a younger child, you can just do this verbally. You don't have to have them writing words if they can't write words or whatever, but they can certainly color it and you can help write them down for them. And then there's always a little mini book that goes into their overall lap book, which again I'll show you in a second for each one, and it goes in on top of this pocket. There's instructions for all of this, and then they can cut up the puzzle, which is on the next page, and keep those pieces inside this pocket in their lap book, so it's all kind of nice and in one location. So there's a puzzle, and you can either just kind of cut these out and laminate them. Sometimes I'll have the kids color them and they just leave them as paper. Obviously they're not very durable that way, but you can kind of just do whatever works for you. And then they are going to just fill out a basic artist page on each one, where they're from, what was their lifespan, what was what were they most famous for? What was your favorite thing? Maybe they can do a portrait or drawing of them as well. And then there's a composer timeline where they can add just significant events that happened in each composer's life. And then it kind of starts all over with doing some more activities based on, the composers as you go through. So the student workbook looks like that. It's fairly similar activities for each one. I mean, the coloring pages change and things like that. And if there was something specific or whatever, then that would be also put in here. So it just kind of depended upon the composer. So that's the student workbook. And then this is what the lap book looks like. So this is a trifold lap book with a flip up, and there's instructions on how to create this. I also have a lap booking video tutorial on YouTube as well you can check out. But we basically just took a lap book, folded in the edges, and then I glue the cover to one side and then flip it over and cut along this and then glue the other side down. So that's just how I do that. This one looks like we taped it because it was starting to come apart. And then this little flap is just one piece of this cut off, and then I just taped it right up here at the top with some clear packing tape. So pretty easy to put together, but it just makes it kind of more of a fun little keepsake to have and to work on as you're going through. So this is just how it's going to be laid out. There's information, all the different periods that music has gone through. There's the composer timeline here where you're going to be adding your composers, and it'll tell you when and where to add them. And then when you open it up in here, you're going to have, oops, somebody's puzzle fell out. That looks like Bach. Okay, so down here, you've got some information on just all of the different stringed instruments, and that your students will be writing what they are. Wind instruments, percussion, bass, and then here's their vocabulary library. And this is just a little flip chart of all of the different kind of common terms and whatnot, and then they can write the definitions for them, and those are in your teacher's manual as well. And then here's a little thing they'll be cutting out in just this way that most orchestras are set up. There are obviously different orchestras out there, so this is just kind of a general overall setup if you're going to have an orchestra. Of course, there's different setups if you have less instruments and that kind of thing, but this is just an overall seating arrangement. And then up here there's a little bit more detailed seating arrangements for different styles and different periods and that kind of thing. So this is just a fun little, this is kind of the overview section of what orchestra is and music and that kind of thing. Then on the inside of the top flap, I just have all of the musicians. They have their little mini book where your students will be writing information about each one of them in there. And then this is also a pocket that houses the puzzle pieces that your students have cut out. So they can kind of keep them all in one location. And I just have those going sideways because this pocket folds this way, and if you had them going up, they would all fold out when you fold it upside down. You could also kind of do them the opposite way, but I think it's just easiest to reach in from the side. So, you can kind of do whatever works for you on those. But that way they have like a little reminder of each one of the musicians that they've looked at and learned about. They can just quickly flip and just get some quick information on each one and that kind of thing. So when they're done, they'll have this. And then I don't think I did it to this one, but I didn't. If you want, you could also add a little pocket back here. Just cut one of these in half and just tape it on these three sides. And then they can put any of their worksheets or anything like that they worked on. You can also keep those worksheets in more of a notebook kind of type of setting that they can, add to or whatever as they're learning, or you can spiral bind them and keep them in there that way as well. So however, you know, you want to do it is best. I tried to make this as flexible as I could, you know, just so that people could kind of use these units however fit their needs the best. So that's basically what the download looks like. This is what you're getting. Again, the teacher's manual, the student workbook, and this is full of all of the information you'll need for these. So the only extra thing you have to buy for that is these file folders, and I just get these in bulk from my office supply store and then let the kids pick fun colors and whatever. And then again, you can do the books, but you don't necessarily have to. All right, guys, so that was my review of the World's Greatest Artist Curriculum. I hope that you enjoyed this. I have a volume 1 and 2 available right now. If you have any specific musicians you'd like to see covered, let me know, and I'll see what I can do to get another unit created. But in the meantime, I hope you enjoy these studies, and I will see you next time.